Here. See. Saan? Dito? Oh,
Okay, so magandang hapon po sa lahat. Welcome to another lecture series for the MSI's 50th anniversary. This afternoon, I have the pleasure of introducing one of our youngest faculty members, Dr. Wilfredo John Santiañez, who is an assistant professor at MSI. He was a DOST Picard Balik scientist and a Blue Pioneers Fellow at the University of California, Santa Cruz. Dr. Santiañez is the collections manager for the G.T. Velasquez Phycological Herbarium and is the principal curator of the Marine Macroalgae Reference Culture Collection here at MSI. His work, he works on various aspects of seaweed, including biology, culture, as he will share with us. He's also one of the rare breeds of taxonomists that is very much needed in the country. Without further ado, I will introduce Fred to share with us his talk.
All right, thank you, Ma'am Annette. I just have to share my screen. Everyone, all right. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining me in this MSI at 50 lecture series. So it was quite difficult to actually follow the first two lectures of the academicians. So as mentioned earlier by Ma'am Annette, I'm one of the youngest faculty here at MSI, but I'll do my best to to provide a really nice lecture for everyone. So my talk will primarily cover seaweed biodiversity, ecology, and cultivation research for a sustainable blue economy, and it will cover previous and current research that are currently being done at MSI and elsewhere in the Philippines, but with, of course, a focus on the works that we do at the Marine Phycology Laboratory, which I currently lead. Sorry. So just a brief background for those who are not familiar. So seaweeds are technically called benthic marine macroalgae, and they are plant-like organisms belonging to the algae group. They're generally large, living attached to rock or hard substrata at the bottom of the sea. So that's why you have bottom means benthic is technical term for bottom, marine, sea, macro because they are large, and then algae because they belong to the to the algae group. And seaweeds is what we call them in general. So seaweeds are ecologically important. No? They are habitat to many marine organisms. They are nursery, foraging grounds, and for a lot of marine organisms, and they can actually support the life history of economically important species such as your cygonids or rabbit fishes. No? They are also primary producers, so they produce oxygen for a lot of marine organisms, and being primary producers, they're also at the base of the food chain. I also often highlight the role of seaweeds, particularly the crustal scarline red algae in facilitating reef formation. Now, so crustal scarline reef algae are considered as the unsung heroes of the marine environment, as they are actually the ones who prepare the substrate for corals and actually facilitates settlement and I think metamorphosis, if I remember correctly, of your corals and facilitating the growth of your reefs. And aside from that because they consolidate the substrate, they are also very important in dissipating wave energy and then protecting your coast, especially during season where wave action are very harsh. So seaweeds are also very much known, I think, especially in the Philippines, because of their economic importance. So in the Philippines and especially in the western Western Pacific Asia region, seaweeds are widely consumed as food, no? So there are also sources of phycocolloids such as your carrageenan and alginates. Particular, the production of carrageenan or the farming of carrageenan producing seaweeds is one of our largest. Is the base actually of the Philippine seaweed industry. They are also used as fertilizers for many of our crops. They can also be added to feeds for our livestock, and they can also be tapped as a potential feedstock for sustainable biofuel production. And more recently, they're also being tapped for their high-value natural products that have bioactivity against several of the viruses and bacteria. So they have the bioactives that seaweeds produce can be used for pharmaceutical, medicinal, and nutraceutical applications. So as I've mentioned earlier, so seaweed farming is one of the major livelihood activity in the Philippines since the 1960s, and this was developed primarily with the help of an American phycologist, Dr. Maxwell Doty, together with our national scientist, Dr. Gavino C. Tronos Jr., which you will learn later is considered as the father of seaweed farming. So at present, the value of seaweed production in the Philippines is at 16.6 billion pesos. And this is just primarily because of the cultivation and the culture of Capaphycus and Eucuma. So seaweed research for sustainable development is primarily I always see that these have several phases, three major phases, and is grounded on the generation of foundational knowledge, and then from this, the technologies are developed and then refined, and these are pilot scale to commercialization. What I want to focus primarily, and the work that we do here at MSI, is primarily focused on generating biodiversity or foundational knowledge on biodiversity, biology, field ecology, and physiology. And in particular, my lab is primarily interested on the biodiversity and systematics of algae, primarily because we believe that together with, as said here by James Sullivan, taxonomy is the hidden but important foundation of the superstructure of aquaculture and mariculture, whether it is mollusk, crustaceans, fish, or seaweeds. So this is succinctly summarized by Dr. Abbott in a more practical terms. No? So she said that the value of seaweed product or a seaweed crop is enhanced by the name under which the seaweed is sold, for the kind and quality of the seaweed product is announced with its names. And this is very practical, and this is very applicable, especially when you look into seaweed farming. No? So, for example, Capaphycus and Eucuma in the Philippines can be farmed together, but your farmers would actually prefer Capaphycus primarily because it commands a higher price as compared to Eucuma. So knowing if you are farming Capaphycus and Eucuma is very essential, it's very crucial, especially and misidentification can actually cause havoc in the seaweed industry, as was demonstrated earlier in the early 2000s by the mass propagation of seaweed that they thought to be Capaphycus, but it's actually a species of Eucuma. And the name also would also give you the information as to which product a seaweed actually is producing. For example, Capaphycus has or produces kappa carrageenan, which is which forms hard gel, and Eucuma would produce iota carrageenan, which actually produces a soft gel. Primarily because kappa carrageenan has a wider application, it's easier to soften kappa carrageenan than to harden iota carrageenan. Kappa tends to command a higher price, so that's actually why it's very important to actually know your seaweeds. So in terms of seaweed biodiversity, the Philippines has over 1,000 65 seaweed taxa, at least based on the published reports and herbarium records. And many of these are primarily from the red seaweeds, followed by the green seaweeds and then brown seaweeds. And about 350 species of seaweeds in the Philippines have economic value, but we're actually just using roughly 10 species. And we're only cultivating actually at least three different species of eucumatoids, Capophycus striatus, Capophycus avarezii, and Eucuma denticulatum, and some other species like your Gracilaria, Gracilariopsis, and even Caulerpa are minimally cultured or harvested from the wild. So when you compare the diversity of the Philippines seaweed flora to the other countries within the tropical Western Pacific, you will see that the Philippines actually have the highest number of seaweed taxa, and it's the most diverse in the tropical Western Pacific. And when we looked into the seaweed biodiversity research conducted in the Philippines, we noted that studies are primarily just focused on at least 5 different areas. So in northern Philippines, in the Babuyan Batanes Island Complex, within Manila Bay, within the Verly Island Passage, the Greater Sorsogon area, and the Sulu Archipelago. And you will see that the Pacific seaboard of the Philippines, the southern Mindanao, and the Calayan Island group remain underexplored and understudied. This work and the succeeding slides that I will be showing is actually a product of the research conducted by my MS or my marine algae class back during the pandemic. It's part of the requirement for the course, and they crunched the numbers. They looked at the biodiversity research conducted in the studies conducted in the Philippines from the 1800s to 2021, and we noted that we observed that from the 1960s, there was at least 2 different peaks in seaweed biodiversity research conducted in the Philippines, and this coincided with the increased interest in seaweed resources development. So, for example, in the 1960s, this is when Capophycus, Eucuma farming actually initiated, and this is also the time when the phycologists, primarily led by our national scientist, Dr. Trono, worked on not only on eucumatoids, Capophycus and Eucuma, but also extended biodiversity work on the other economically important species such as your Gracilaria, Laurentia, Sargassum, Acanthophyra, and the likes. So since then, we actually seen some two different peaks, no, and the ones conducted in 2010 to 2020 were primarily also driven by the advent of molecular techniques, no, and this actually facilitated, as you will see later, increase in the description of species and discovery of species in the Philippines. However, when we also looked at the recent work from 2000 to 2010, and we noted that while there are actually studies on seaweed biodiversity in the Philippines were primarily led by Filipinos or primarily or are done together with Filipinos, there's actually a considerable amount of studies that have been done by or published by foreigners without actually Filipinos within this in their work. You know? So they've been describing taxa from the Philippines without us, and without Filipinos in the as part of the authors. So you will also, when we also look at the focus or the target of the different biodiversity research in the Philippines, you will also see that these are also, again, focused on economically important taxa, such as the Carrageenan producing species under Gigartinales, where your Capophycus and your Eucuma, or locally known as Guso, are found, and the other and agar producing Gracilariales, where your Gracilaria and your Gracilariopsis, which are locally known as gulaman, are found. And then the other food species under Bryopsidales, such as your Caulerpa or your Lato. So as I've mentioned earlier, you will also see that from 2000 to 2001, we have seen a steady increase in the number of new seaweed species. So there are a lot of new seaweed species have been discovered and described in the Philippines. And this actually points to the prevalence of hidden diversity and the potential for new discoveries in the Philippines. No? Okay, so much about seaweed biodiversity studies. We now move to the ecological studies conducted on Philippine seaweed flora. And again, similar to those of those that have been done in seaweed biodiversity research in the Philippines, these works are also primarily focused on the economically important taxa, such as your again, your Carrageenan producing Eucuma and Capaphycus and Acanthophora, and the agar producing Gracilaria, that should be Gilidiella, and then Gracilariopsis, and then the brown seaweed Sargassum, which produces alginates, among others. So as the understanding, so I just want to highlight here that the understanding of the ecology and the reproductive biology of eucumatoids as actually the one that ushered the development and success of seaweed farming in the tropical in the Pacific Ocean. And this seaweed farming actually, it started and was initiated in the Philippines and has expanded throughout the region. And the works that have been done primarily by Dr. Trona and his kanyang mga advisees before, si Dr. Edna Tiganson Fortes and Dr. Asanza, was very instrumental in the advancement of the tropical seaweed farming, particularly of Capaphycus and Eucuma. And I'm not sure if all of you was here in the last lecture series, but Dr. Azanza, she was actually, and I'm also really very proud of the work that she did on the reproductive biology, primarily of Eucuma. It's award-winning work, and that's also very instrumental in our understanding and the advancement of eucumatoid culture in the Philippines and the tropical Pacific. So aside from Eucuma Capaphycus, the phycologists and the industry actually also wanted to expand the utilization and the harnessing of the seaweed resources and of the Philippines. And one of the targeted resource is the brown seaweed Sargassum, primarily because they can be used as source of alginates. It's similar to your carrageenan. They can also be used as a gelling agent, and it was, and one of the targeted, so they targeted Sargassum in the Philippines, and Dr. Trono, along with his advisees, Dr. Puto Ang, Dr. Sir Roy Luisma, Grace Tolentino, and other researchers in Visayas, like Hilconida Kalumpong, Dr. Anisha Hurtado, and Dr. Danilo Largo worked on the Sargassum resources of the Philippines. And in particular, I really want to highlight that Sargassum is a resource that is difficult to actually culture because of the challenge in their life history. And pending the development of the culture technology for Sargassum, Dr. Trono and Dr. and Grace Valentino Publico actually developed a harvest schedule and methods to sustainably harvest wild Sargassum based on the previous works conducted on the biology, ecology, and even natural products chemistry of Sargassum. So another work on the understanding of ecology of seaweeds that facilitated the land to sea based culture technology development was done on the red seaweed Halimenia dervillei. So Halimenia dervillei, wrong spelling here, produces carrageenan and R-phycoerythrine. So R-phycoerythrine is a very expensive natural product produced by red seaweeds, and it actually commands a very high price. 1 milligram is at 150 US dollars. No, so because of that, Dr. Trono, along together with Dr. Montaño, embarked on a journey to develop the mariculture of the Halimenia durvillei, and part of the work that we did towards that is understanding the biology, reproductive biology, and ecology of the red seaweed Halimenia durvillei in Bolina, Pangasinan, and resulted through the development of techniques for cultivation of this red seaweed from spore to sea outplanting. So, as I've repeatedly, as you've shown earlier, you will see that Philippine ecologists are actually at the forefront of developing and refining culture technologies to harness and conserve seaweed resources through seaweed farming. And I've mentioned earlier na, yun nga, considered as a seaweed father of seaweed farming, ang isa sa ating mga Professor Emeritus and national scientist, si Dr. Gavino Trono Jr., and he led several seaweed culture technology development works to support the development of the Philippine blue economy. So aside from being at the forefront and one of the leaders or the pioneers in developing the farming of Eucheuma and Capaphycus, Dr. Trono was also instrumental in the development of culture technology for the pond culture, for example, of Caulerpa and Gracilaria, and more recently, Halimenia. So, owing to the owing to the works initiated or facilitated by Dr. Trono, seaweed farming or seaweed research for development is actually one of the pioneer or one of the tawag na to, isa sa mga pundasyon ng MSI. And at the core of that, aside from seaweed biodiversity research, seaweed farming research for development has been at the core of the phycological studies at MSI. And I really want to highlight the most recent work we did at MSI, particularly in the early 2010s, where MSI led this very big seaweeds research and development program under the leadership of Dr. Edna Tiganson Fortes. And this work actually facilitated a lot of the works that we are now seeing, or initiated or became a seed for many of the works that we are seeing here across the archipelago. So I think one of the major accomplishments in particular of this group is the development and establishment of indoor seaweed nurseries, which are gene bank for Capaphycus and Eucheuma at several research institutions or several academic institutions throughout the archipelago, and primarily at the southern Mindanao at the MSU Tawi-Tawi, in Palawan State University, and of course here at MSI. For example, at MSI. Okay, so for example, the one that was initiated during the series R&D is currently being continued primarily by one of our colleagues here under the algal ecophysiology laboratory. So presently, this work on gene banking and development and expanding the genetic resources for Capaphycus and Eucheuma is maintained and expanded by the algal ecophysiology laboratory. So, and aside from that, I've mentioned earlier, so I kept repeating about this work on Halimenia because this is primarily because this actually received attention from the seaweed, from the private industry, and we're actually working now together with Plantex. It's an Australian-based company, and we're trying to establish a facility primarily in Leyte to actually develop or commercialize the technology developed by Dr. Trona. So seaweed cultivation research on Halimenia was initiated primarily, again, because of the carrageenan and the R-phycoerythrin and the R-phycocyanin that's produced by your red seaweed Halimenia. And but the first culture technology that was developed by Dr. Chana was primarily based on vegetative propagule. So uh, we collect seaweeds from the wilds, we cut them, and then we grow them in tanks or in aquaria. So this kind of culture technology may actually lead to the depletion of natural stocks because you are actually very dependent on what is available in the wild. So because of that, we thought that it's actually better uh, to tap on the capacity, on the reproductive biology of your red seaweeds and their capacity to produce spore in order for them to mass propagate. So what we did was we wrote a proposal to to develop a culture technology from spores and submitted it to the A-bar, and fortunately it got funded. So we now have a culture technology that was developed for the Halumena Dorvile, which is currently being tapped by Plantech so that we can commercialize it here in the country. So I've mentioned earlier about the brown seaweed sargassum and their economic importance. So more recently, I think in early 2010s, there was also a massive harvesting of the brown seaweed sargassum, primarily for their to use them as feeds and as fertilizer for crops. No? So there was a massive gathering from several areas within the archipelago, and this actually prompted BFAR to release a, a an administrative order prohibiting the collection, harvesting, gathering, and selling and exporting of the brown seaweeds, sargassum, and this was later actually amended so that coastal populations can still make use of those that are part of the CRAC. So these FAO or Fisheries Administrative Order were actually put in place primarily to protect the resource from overharvesting and depletion because when they harvest sargassum and export it, we're talking not just about kilos, we're talking about tons of sargassum. These are being transported by big trucks, okay, and then exported to our friendly neighbor. And then um, so this one is being this is a response of BFAR to actually protect the resource so that pending the culture technology development for sargassum. So fortunately, one of our active seaweeds researchers in the Philippines, Dr. Danilo B. Largo, has also have a heart to develop the sargassum resources of the Philippines. He has like decades of work on sargassum, and I think like me, he also fell in love with seaweeds because of sargassum. So he developed this culture technology for the mass propagation of sargassum in the Philippines, and this is a fairly recent and a very very promising method for the propagation of seaweeds sargassum in the Philippines. So you can find his work published in the Methods X journal. So given all these context on the current on the previous seaweed biodiversity, ecology, and cultivation research in the Philippines, what do we do now? Because I mean, I've been talking about people who are at the ano na sila yung mga nasa rurok, no? So what do we do at the lab to actually contribute here at MSI in my lab to contribute towards the sustainable development of seaweed resources in support of the Philippine blue economy? So I currently lead the Marine Phycology Laboratory. I'm currently an assistant professor. Hopefully, ma-promote soon. So we can basic and applied seaweeds research in the Philippines. So I primarily am focused on working on the biodiversity and systematics. So systematics research is on the taxonomy, classification, and nomenclature of your seaweeds. And this work is not just limited in the Philippines. I'd like to believe that I work on the biodiversity at the global scale. And then we also use phylogenetics and evolution to understand the distribution of the biodiversity and to also understand the relationship of your different seaweeds. Additionally, because of again, I work actually, my first work at MSI is actually not on biodiversity, but on the ecology of sargassum. So this is actually why I said na it's my first love. No, sargassum is my first love. So I always gravitate towards understanding seaweed community ecology, and especially towards sargassum. And of course, being trained by national scientists, mentored by Dr. Trono, who has a heart to actually develop or a passion to actually develop the seaweed resources of the Philippines. I actually also conduct marine marine agronomical research or seaweed farming research, not just on eucalyptus but on several other seaweeds. So we do what we do at the lab, and we focus on the several research primarily because we believe that developing our seed resources needs, in order for us to develop our Philippine seaweed resources, we need to build knowledge and understanding on these resources for us to benefit from it. And aside from that, we also need to increase support in building local expertise, infrastructures, and funding on seaweed biodiversity, systematics, biology, ecology, and cultivation research. And we also want to highlight that we need collaboration. The Philippines is very, very big. You know, the coastal area is the coast of the Philippines among the longest in the Philippines, and definitely MSI cannot do everything. So we need to actually collaborate with everything, with a lot of different institutions across the archipelago, especially towards developing the different seaweed resources. So what we want at MSI, and especially in the lab, we really want to walk our talk now. So we've been talking and preaching about all this, but I want to also highlight the things that we do in order for us to actually contribute towards the sustainable development of our seaweed resources. And we start with building and knowledge and understanding of our seaweed biodiversity. So our lab has been fortunate to join actually several cruises, research expedition towards understanding the diversity and distribution of the different seaweed resources in the western in the Calayan Island group, or in broadly the West Philippine Sea. So my lab, especially JM, has actually participated in several of these cruises in the Calayan Island group in 2019, 2021, 2020, 2022. So at least in the first cruise that we participated in 2019, we actually recorded 33 new seaweeds in the Calayan Island group, suggesting that the earlier assumption that the seaweeds in Kalayaan is actually depauperate, or meaning sobrang onti nila at saka hindi ganun karami, is actually not true. So there's a lot of seaweeds, and you will see actually that later. There are a lot of seaweeds in the Kalayaan Island group that are yet to be described and are yet to be presented to the world, no? So aside from those done in the Kalayaan Island group, we also participate in research cruises in several areas in the country, and one of the most recent one was in the Benham Bank in the Philippine Rice. So my group actually just participated Aurora leg, not the sorry, not the Benham Bank expedition part, but we were able to actually access some of the collections of seaweed resources from the Benham Bank, and one of our major findings is that we confirmed that there are at least 3 different species of Caulerpa in the Pacific seaboard and the Philippines, and this is actually the first time that we confirmed the presence of Caulerpa bikinensis in the Philippines. And Caulerpa bikinensis in the Philippines was found at the Benham Bank at the depth of around 80 to 90 meters, and it forms massive beds there. So this is a very, very interesting find. in the Benham Bank in the Philippine rice. No, so Caloepa bikinensis uh, is a very, very interesting seaweed in terms of its in terms of distribution and its ecology. So again, I mentioned earlier that my first love is sargassum, so I always gravitate to sargassum. So one of my work is on the biodiversity of sargassum of the north Western Philippines, so the West Philippine Sea area from Ilocos Norte down to Pangasinan. We look into the biodiversity of the sargassum resources in those areas, and primarily because we are inspired of the previous works of Dr. Torno na showing that these areas is actually among the very diverse in the Philippines. No, so but our molecular assisted taxonomic studies suggest that the species diversity within this region may actually be overestimated, and that we're only seeing at least 3 different species. No, so that's Sargassum aquifolium, Sargassum acifolium, and Sargassum polycystum. So aside from that, we also work on seaweed. So this work is actually part of our efforts to contribute to the understanding of the sargassum, primarily for its conservation and its management. And hopefully, this can also be used by Dr. Largo's team in the development work of the culture for our sargassum resources. So aside from that, we also worked on the biodiversity of ulva. So I'm not sure if all of you are familiar with ulva, but ulva is an ecologically and economically important seaweeds. No, so as an yung ecological importance niya is actually highlighted by the closure of Boracay. Okay, so it's actually the ulva are actually the reason. The bloom of ulva is actually one of the major reasons why your Boracay was actually closed in the mid 2010s, and and then it's also economically important because ulva species are actually can actually be consumed as food. If I've been telling this to my students, that if you've eaten okonomiyaki and then you use that green powder, you're actually eating ulva. No, so that's aonori. And then, but aside from that, aside from being consumed by humans, your ulva can actually be added to the feeds of cultured organisms like your yung mga cultured na mga fish, for example. And I believe yung researchers in UP Visayas have been actively working on the addition of ulva to the feeds of aquacultured organisms for the macronutrients and the micronutrients that they possess. So among our goal in understanding the biodiversity of the seaweed resources of the Philippines is that we really wanted to look as to what species we have, because first is if we know if which species are problematic, then we can actually have a targeted effort to that species. No, kasi diba, as much of our problems, we really need to identify what our problem is to have para mas maging mainam at mas targeted yung ating efforts towards addressing that problem. And so we started our work on the biodiversity of ulva in Batangas, primarily because Batangas is an area where you have high human activity. It's one of our industrialized areas in Luzon, and because of the industrialization, ulva tends to respond positively to that industrialization activity, to those activities. So we tried to identify the different species of ulva, and we noted that misidentifications may be widespread in ulva in the Philippines. So ulva in the Philippines, we used to have or we used to identify this foliose ulva as ulva lactuca, but based on our studies, we're actually not seeing ulva lactuca, at least in Batangas and in southern Mindanao. We have also samples from Tawi-Tawi and from Cebu. We're not of Folios uva. We're not seeing that. So and also our works also suggest that we are overlooking a lot of our seaweed uva species. So in our work, we're actually reporting the at least two new records of uva in the Philippines, Ulva tepida and Uva spumosa. We're supposed to report Uva meridionalis as a new seaweed record in the Philippines, but we're too slow in writing. So someone has beaten us into it. So, and then the other one that we're working on is on the brown seaweeds, Lobophora. So Lobophora, and this work is primarily focused in the Lobophora of the Bolinao and the Reef Complex. And Lobophora used to be the understanding of Lobophora is that there's only one species that is very widespread throughout the world, no? So that's Lobophora variegata. But recent work by Vera et al. Suggests that we are actually seeing the diversity of Lobophora is actually is underestimated, and that there are at least over 30 different species of ulva that is occurring around the world. So based on our molecular assisted taxonomic studies, we're also adding 3 new records of Lobophora to the Philippines. So Lobophora asiatica, Lobophora obscura, Lobophora challengeri. So we're interested in understanding Lobophora primarily because one, it is ecologically important. No? So it produces allelopathic chemicals against corals. Okay, so I was actually I was surveying looking for I was surveying Malinap Channel looking for Asparagopsis taxiformis, was looking at the reef, and I've been seeing that there's a lot of Lobophora along the on the benthos, no, and then it's associated closely associated with your corals, and I'm seeing that your Lobophora is actually I know spreading. So I'm actually asking our coral reef scientists I think Lobophora is actually negatively impacting the reef in Bolinao, Pangasinan, because they are actually covering substantial area in the reef. At least based on my observations. So aside from that, the buffer are also just like many other seaweeds, they produce bioactives. So they have derivatives that that have pharmacological bioactivity. So they have compounds here. The compounds here that I'm actually showing have cytotoxic, anti-cancer, antifungal, antibacterial activity. So that's why we wanted to look into the Lobophora of the Philippines, primarily because we also want to explore the possibility of them being sources of drugs. So now those are primarily the things that we do towards contributing, building knowledge and understanding for biodiversity. And now I will be showing to you the works that we do in supporting the building of local expertise infrastructures for biodiversity, biology, ecology, and cultivation research. And I want to highlight first, okay, yes, I always highlight the people in the lab primarily because I'm really, really proud of the work that they do. And these are among the really rare breeds who have passion actually for phycology. So losing new leaders in Philippine seaweeds research for development requires mentoring and training students and researchers across the archipelago. And the lab, more recently, the lab has been very, very open towards welcoming student interns, undergraduates from several state universities and colleges across the archipelago, because we want to plant the seeds for the new generations to actually also have the heart for phycology and for the development of our seaweed resources. And I'm really, really glad that even though my lab is very young, it is able to attract several researchers and even graduate students. And I'm really, really proud of Briggs here. Oh, so he's there. So Briggs is the first master's graduate of the lab, and so isa din siya actually sa cohort niya, siya yung una na DOST scholar na gumraduate. So that's why I'm really, really proud. So pero yeah, together with I think Jerwin here, siya magka-cohort sila yung halos magkasabay na gumraduate. So yeah, so Briggs worked actually on the brown seaweed sargassum, o di ba? Laging sargassum kami. So, nabudol ko siya towards working on sargassum. And he really wanted, Briggs really wanted, when he approached me, he said that, I want to work on ecology. And I said, I really have a very, very good project for you. So sabi ko, sargassum would be a very, very good candidate for a master's thesis. So he embarked on a journey and sabi niya, okay, we'll work on sargassum. So we look for funding. So sabi niya gusto niya, so naghanap kami ng pondo. Mahirap lang yung lab ko, pero naghanap kami ng pondo. So we actually got a funding from Nagao Environmental Foundation. It's a Tokyo-based company. So nagbigay sila ng seed grant for us to actually look into the changes of the phenology of sargassum in Bolinao, Pangasinan after decades of environmental change. So this work is actually based on isa sa mga pinaka pundasyon ng aming work is actually yung decades worth of work ni Dr. Trono and his colleagues, and yung Dr. Trono, ni Ariel Ortiz, si Grace Tolentino, and even Sir Roy. Yung work ni Sir Roy on sargassum is actually one of our really, really good references for this work. So one of the things that I want to highlight is that raising new leaders in Philippine seaweed research for development requires a safe and enabling environment, especially for early career researchers to excel and innovate. And I really want to highlight this kasi I'm really proud of the work, of the works that my lab has been doing. No? So puro, if you will follow our page, puro siya congratulations kasi ang galing nung researchers namin, especially yung in-house namin, si JM has been reaping accolades back and forth, national, international conferences. He was even able to actually access grant from an international organization just to do work on the biodiversity of seaweed. So and I'd like to believe that the accomplishments in the lab was also primarily because in the lab, I always try to give my teammates a safe and enabling environment. I always encourage them to speak their mind and to also explore, kung ano yung gusto nila, suportahan, no? So kasi for example, JM worked on green, brown, red seaweeds, but now he's actually focusing for his thesis on brown seaweeds. So parang ang dami-dami niyang gustong gawin. And for me, I don't have a problem with that so long as, I'm confident naman na makakagraduate siya soon. Okay. So yun lang. It's just that I think this is also because I provide an enabling and safe environment for my research staff, primarily because I also experienced the same. So Dr. Trono was my mentor, and parang kung ano yung gusto ko gawin, ano yung mga plataforma ko, he's always very, very supportive of the things that I want to do and we want to pursue. And he was actually the one who actually pushed me na go out abroad, mag-Ph.D. ka abroad, and then go back here in the Philippines to continue the work that we do here at MSI to support the development of our seaweed resources. So I hope na with that, I hope to continue that tradition in the lab, and hopefully my lab mates will appreciate that and can testify to it. So, um, so towards the development of seaweed resources, diba, sabi ko nga kanina, we need to develop the expertise, local expertise. And I believe that raising new leaders in phycology and to promote sustainable development, it will require an investment on people and decentralizing infrastructures and expertise. And towards that end, my lab, we try to go out on our way, actually, para to help training and people in the regions. During the pandemic, we conducted several trainings, online trainings, but more recently we go out of our way to actually do trainings on identifying, for example, our seaweed resources, seaweed taxonomy, and to a certain degree, we actually offer also training on seaweed farming. And one of the participants actually asked they are if how can they actually tap on our expertise on seaweed biodiversity research and on seaweed farming. And I told them that, you know what, just tell us the date, arrange for our transportation. You don't need to pay us. We will go to you, because I always have this thought na, you just need to actually train and influence people towards doing seaweed biodiversity research in order for them to actually become one of the champions for the development of these resources. Kasi for the longest time, I mean, lagi kasi tayo nakafocus, di ba? I mean, sorry, for the coral reef, di ba? So laging doon yung ating focus. But I mean, we do have these resources that actually also are changing lives. But there are very few of us that actually work on seaweed biodiversity research and extension for the development and to support our economy. So towards that end, I also really want to highlight the works that are being done, hindi lang ng MSI, kundi ng other organizations in the regions, no? So I'm really proud of the work that Dr. Halun is doing at MSU Tawi-Tawi. So she's currently the director, and I think she's the founder of the Seaweed Research Development Center of MSU in Tawi-Tawi. And when I visited their indoor seaweed nursery, I cannot help but really be in awe of the works that they are doing in the area. And they're doing this primarily because they also want to support the development of seaweed farming in the Sulu archipelago. Okay, not just in the Sulu archipelago, but also envisioning that the works that they do can actually also be expanded towards the Mindanao and the entire Philippines. And I'm also very indebted actually to the mentoring of Zaida in ShareDeck, because I actually got one of her researchers, CCM, to actually na-inspire na mag-work on phycology, and now she is actually one of our researchers in the lab and one of our graduate students, and I'm really looking forward to the day that she will be able to also actively work on the development of our seaweed. So CM din pala, so I forgot to mention, but she actually did the work on ulva. Okay, so yung biodiversity work natin sa ulva, trabaho yon ni CM. So I think she will also be using that for her master's. Part of that will be part of her master's research. So, and also there's also part of so ShareDeck is actually, I also want to commend actually Picard, because the establishment of ShareDeck is part of the NICER program, and it's really nice that it's a really nice effort to decentralize the expertise of seaweeds research for development and to invest in the capacities and in the people in the regions. And I think it's one of the really nice work that they did, especially towards the advancement of the marine resources conservation and development of the Philippines. So, isa din uh, sa mga grupo na nagtatrabaho on seaweeds are the people from the College of Fisheries and Ocean Sciences at the University of the Philippines in Visayas, and they are primarily working on the ecophysiology, post-harvest processing of your seaweed resources. And I'm really I recently attended the International Conference on Fisheries and Aquatic Sciences hosted by ICFAS, and I was like really in awe of the things that they've been doing towards the advancement of the seaweed resources of the Philippines. And I couldn't be prouder of the work that they are doing in Central Visayas towards the advancement of seaweed farming in the Philippines. And as you can see, ang dami-daming mga mini-mentor from the undergraduate to the graduate degree na kanilang seaweed research group. No? So, okay. So, balik tayo sa MSI. No? So, sa MSI, what I'm doing also to contribute towards the investing in people and decentralizing infrastructure and expertise is that we actually partner also with several psychologists towards training the new generation of seaweed researchers for development in the country. And one of the works that we do is on the biology and ecology of the red seaweed Asparagopsis taxiformis. So we are interested on Asparagopsis taxiformis primarily because they produce bromoform that can significantly reduce the amount of methane belched by cows. No? So 0.2% addition of Asparagopsis to cow feeds can reduce 98% of the methane belched by cows. So that's a very significant reduction in the carbon footprint of your cattle industry. So I work with Dr. J.B. Sacco and several of his teammates at the Batangas State University. And along with our work on Asparagopsis, we also work on ulva. No? So understanding ulva primarily towards addressing their potential for green tide blooms. No? So gusto natin maiwasan yung nangyari doon sa Boracay. So we're trying to work on ulva, and for this one is I am the project leader. Dr. JV Sacco is the co-project leader. And for this one, nag-swap naman kami. So siya yung project leader, ako yung co-project leader, and so this both projects recently ended, no? So we're trying to close these projects. So again, one of the really nice investments of Picard on decentralizing infrastructures and investing on people and expertise, no, is on when they funded actually the work on the cultivation of ulva primarily. Oh, so this should be Alvin Monotilla. I'm so sorry, Alvin. So Alvin is actively working on the land-based cultivation of ulva, and he's based at the University of San Carlos in Cebu. And these are the recent photos that I grabbed from the FB page of the MRRD, showing the recent visit to the facilities of Alvin at the University of San Carlos. So when talking about infrastructure, during the introduction earlier, it was mentioned I'm currently the principal curator of the UPMSI Marine Macroalgal Reference Culture Collection. It's a mouthful, so we usually call it UPMARC. So UPMARC is actually part of our effort to complement the works that we do at the herbarium. No? So primarily it's for biobanking, genetic bank, and for documenting seaweed biodiversity resources. But because we are seeing a lot of, and you will see that later, we're seeing a lot of seaweeds that have good potentials for pharmaceutical, uh, um, medicinal, and nutraceutical applications. We are also now maintaining a lot of seaweed resources towards development for these different applications. So it started this work in 2018 with a seed grant from the OVCRD, and we now have over 600 seaweeds, no, live cultures of seaweeds collected from several marine biogeographic regions across the archipelago. And these are primarily being maintained by J.M. Lastimoso and Ace Guertano. So these beautiful seaweeds, those that you can see actually down at the upmark, are actually the product of years of labor, love and labor and passion of these two members of the lab. So I mentioned that the upmark is part of our uh, documenting of our seaweed biodiversity, and our work actually proved really, really beneficial and effective towards species discovery. You know? So for example, for our work on the minute red seaweeds, the Lyseriaceae, resulted to our discovery of at least 6 different new lineages of the Lyseriaceae from the West Philippine Sea. So, ito mga maliliit na mga red seaweeds na to na buhay doon at pinapatubo namin, meron tayong 5, and this represents potentially at least 2 different genera. So, as you can see, Upmark really holds good potential for species discovery. And then this is also work being done by JM on the species, also on species discovery, and this is on the brown filamentous seaweed Asterocladon, and we're trying to describe this new seaweed as Asterocladon Anakbanwe because it was collected from Pangasinan, and to honor the Anakbanwa people, which who are the indigenous people that founded the province of Pangasinan. And aside from species discovery, I've mentioned earlier na, 'di ba, meron kami mga discoveries of seaweeds that have potential for pharmaceutical, medicinal, and even nutraceutical applications. And I really want to highlight our really great finds on the different Griffithia species that we have in culture. No? So at least we are seeing 3 different new species, and we are interested in growing and maintaining, propagating Griffithia, primarily because Griffithia are actually producers of the bioactive Griffithsin. So Griffithsins are broad spectrum antivirals, and they actually are yung Griffithsin is actually used for anti-HIV compound. No, so this is actually also, so I'm highlighting this primarily because this is also a call for collaboration. So if you're interested in drug discovery, in natural products chemistry, drug discovery, in analyzing the Griffithsin in the different seaweed taxa or seaweed cultures that we have, up for grabs siya. Marami kaming biomass na nasa lab. So we are open for collaboration for this kind of work. And but I think okay. So now that we're talking about collaboration, so most of the collaborations that we do actually on the natural products chemistry and even the derivatives of seaweeds are actually also being done by at least 2 different labs here at the MSI. So yung IBBR lab, and then yung protein the lab of Dr. So that's with Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Isadora Yu. But we are not closing our doors to collaborations for several other researchers that are up for or are interested towards the development of our seaweed resources. So now that we're talking about collaboration, seaweed research and extension for development of seaweeds in the Philippines also provides opportunities for local and international collaboration. So most of my international collaborations are actually grounded on biodiversity research, primarily because I am a biodiversity scientist and I'm interested on the systematics of the different seaweeds. But most of the work we do locally is on the development of the seaweed resources, primarily tapping on the different bioproducts that the different biomasses of your seaweeds are producing. So towards that end, I just want to highlight this project proposal, and it's a collaborative research program of seaweed researchers from Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao. So I consider this as my dream team. No? So because these actually are a collection, no, of different scientists working on biology, ecology, physiology, post-harvest, natural products chemistry, and even economics of seaweeds farming. So we actually submitted a proposal, or we actually drafted a proposal on ulva cultivation research for innovations and sustainable production systems. So primarily, we're targeting ulva, developing ulva from land-based to sea-based, and then valorizing the different products, and also analyzing the value chain for the cultivation of ulva. And then one of the work that we also want to do, kasi nga, aside from the, di ba sabi ko nga, aside, we work at the basic and applied, but we also, I also have a heart for the management of coastal resources. And one of the resources that we have that we want to actually conserve is your gamet. So gamet is wild harvested in northern Philippines, and is actually considered as the black gold. No, so this is our local nori, if you're familiar with nori. So this is considered as a black gold because it commands a very high price, and it's actually part of the diet, identity, and culture of Filipinos in northern Philippines, and it's celebrated even with the Gamet Festival. So, however, the problem, or well, the challenge that we have in Gamet is that it's only wild harvested, and there is no locally adapted culture technology. So what we really want is to help also the locals to sustainably produce indigenous nori by hopefully partnering with them in the development of the harvest management strategy, as well as harnessing the post-harvest 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 of nori, because I think one of the problem of the nori that being produced in northern Philippines is that there are a lot of impurities. So you want to actually maximize the potential by training them in post-harvest processing of our nori resources. So supposedly I'm supposed to be traveling in Cagayan today because I forgot that I have a talk. But so I had to postpone my travel to Cagayan to do this study because of this talk. But tomorrow we'll be traveling. So this work is actually funded by the Blue Pioneers program under the University of Santa Cruz, University of California in Santa Cruz, and this is in collaboration with both local and abroad na mga researchers. So I am collaborating primarily with Tri Hutomo here, is currently a PhD student and also part of the Blue Pioneers program, studying. Is an Indonesian studying in Tokyo. Mariska is also an Indonesian. He works in a bank. She works in a bank. Flora here works with Rare Philippines, and is one of the founders of Tindagat PH. So they are actually promoting sustainable fisheries, no, in the Philippines. And of course, I also tap on the expertise. I'm also tapping on the expertise of Godfred here from the Department of Food Science and Nutrition of the College of Home Economics, and Glai, who's one of our graduate students, uh, is currently in Cagayan State University, and of course with the BFAR and the LGU of Cagayan. So again, I hope it is clear for everyone that, again, in order for us to develop the resources of the Philippines towards supporting the sustainability of the Philippine blue economies, that we really need to build knowledge and understanding of our seaweed resources for our benefit. So not just yung sa economical, but also for our health. Kasi of course, your seaweeds can be, source of food and nutrition. So your nutrition and even medicine, pharmaceutical applications, and even nutraceutical applications. And then we also need to uh, increase support in building local expertise, infrastructures, and funding on seaweed research. And again, to collaborate. So for collaboration, I welcome collaboration. So you may visit our lab at marinephycolab.netlify.com to check on our work. And then you may also follow us at Facebook and Twitter at marinephycolab. And you may email me at wjsantianes@msi.up.edu.ph for details. So with this, I end my presentation with an acknowledgement to the members, primarily of the lab, and for the Marine Science Institute for providing an enabling environment for us to actually be excellent and honorable in the work that we do. And of course, our work at the Marine Phycology Lab and the phycological research being done here at MSI is really parang markado or sinimulan ng mga researchers na to, Dr. Trono, Dr. Ganzon Fortes, Dr. Montaño, Dr. Azanza. And I really, really want to thank them for the inspiration that they gave me towards, and also imparting the passion actually to to conserve, develop the seaweed resources in the Philippines. And also we want to highlight uh, the funding agencies, so we cannot work we cannot accomplish anything siguro kung wala kaming pondo. So we want to thank the DNR, BMB, DAB4, PCG, Nagao, our patron, Diversity Picard, the DST Balik Scientist Program, and of course, OVPAA, UP and OVCRD for providing me the seed grant for most of the work that I've been doing here at MSI. And of course, more recently, for the Blue Pioneers Program of the UC Santa Cruz, which is now enabling me to work on the gamete of the Philippines. So thank you, everyone, for your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Santiañez, for that very informative talk. We learned about our seaweed biodiversity, the applications of this valuable resource, as well as the collaborations that you have done throughout the years with different researchers around the country. Thank you so much for your sharing. We are now on questions from our Zoom participants and our participants here at the MSI AVR. Anyone who would want to ask any questions or give any insights based on the talk that we just heard? So So, congratulations, Fred.
Has any Are there any accomplishments in terms of mapping the entire archipelago in terms of sites that are suitable for farming? Has that been done? Because not all coastal areas will support the growth of seaweeds, right? And then I was wondering, after decades and decades, because I was a student not only of Dr. Trono but also of Dr. G.T. Velasquez. So after all of these decades of seaweed research, you'd think that coastal communities would have seaweed in their diet already, routinely in their diet, right? Like you said, they should already be part of the local economy in terms of culture and harvest, not only for local consumption, but even export. So I have two questions. So are these already happening? If not, why not? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that really nice question. So, yeah, I actually forgot about that mapping of seaweeds. No, so there's actually an effort done by Hailey Roa, together with researchers from MSU Naaman in mapping the different seaweed farming areas in the Philippines. So that has actually already been done. So, and they also provided a sort of like a farming schedule of the different farming areas in across the Philippine archipelago. So both GIS, and then they also worked on they also did some ground truthing. But with respect naman to the doon sa seaweed farming areas in the Philippines and suitability, actually JM presented a paper in Iloilo a couple of 2 weeks ago. Tama ba? 2 weeks ago on the suitability mapping of Capaficus and Euclima farms in the Philippines. And he actually looked at the different climate scenarios, like degrees of heating throughout the years, I think for 100 years, 50 to 100 years, 20, 50, 100 years. And then he actually saw that the areas that we are actually, especially yung sa Sulu Archipelago, are still suitable. Some would actually tawag nito, contract, but some would actually remain to be suitable for seaweed farming in the Philippines. So with respect to the using seaweed as food, no, I think in most cases it's an acquired taste. So, I mean, growing up, I've been eating gusto, Capaficus yucuma, Capaficus, and then lato, Colerpa. But for some, and I think a lot do not like the taste of Colerpa, your lato, because it tastes like you're like eating sea water. So it tastes like seawater actually. So different areas would have different preferences with the different seaweeds that they consume. So although I think in some areas they're also trying to expand the utilization of different seaweeds through the in their cuisines. So I think more recently yung iba nag-introduce na nung Caulerpa. It's just that some areas just doesn't grow them. No, so these are not available in these areas, so they don't have access to this, so these are not part of their diet. So, but with the introduction of culture technologies, and I think there are a lot of packaged seaweed goods recently, so these are slowly being introduced to the populace.
We have two questions from Zoom. So one is a bit related to what you already just said. Hi, Doc, are we seeing a future for the mariculture of nori? So he's asking if it's possible in a sense, I guess. And then the second question is, seaweed farming is currently being looked at for its potential in carbon dioxide removal. This is from Dr. Ferreira. To enhance ocean alkalinity. This could possibly add more value to seaweed farming as an important contribution to the blue economy. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, so first is on nori or on the gamete of the Philippines. We definitely want uh, the gamete of the Philippines to be a competitive economic resource yung in terms of its market value, kasi and I think one of the challenges nga lang kasi with the harnessing of our nori resources is that setting aside the fact na hindi tayo maka-mass produce and that these are only wild harvested, the post-harvest processing is one of the challenging part, no? I think there are several efforts that has been done to actually provide more value to the nori or the gamete of the Philippines in terms of its post harvest, but our nori harvesters will always gravitate towards the production of the pedazo, yung pabilog na nori, kasi I think it's yun, nakasanayan na kasi. So in terms of kung may future ba, that's actually what we are envisioning, no? And what we want to contribute to in our project with SPIN, yung sa Blue Pioneers project, na sana we want to add more value to the gamete or the nori being produced in northern Philippines by enhancing the post-harvest processing, and we want to provide training opportunities, but yun, ngayon kasi nasa scoping pa lang kami, and hopefully yun talaga yung vision na parang yung market value of the nori of northern Philippines would actually be competitive enough that your locals will actually also have the drive to conserve and protect them because of their economic value. And the other one is yung on the use of seaweeds and seaweed farms in carbon sequestration to reduce ocean acidification. Medyo and nga sa blue carbon, no, there's a lot of debate on that regard, and kasi while it is true that your seaweeds can actually sequester a lot of carbon as they grow and actually contribute to the reduction of contribute towards reduction of pH in coastal areas. Yung carbon sequestration kasi is very, yung life cycle is very quick. Kasi it's supposedly kasi, di ba, yung blue carbon, yung storage, dapat matagal siya. So, but the problem with farm seaweed is that the seaweed, the biomass, is converted into different products, and then the utilization of those different products actually releases the fixed carbon back to the so kaya medyo there's a lot of debate on the utilization or on the application of seaweed farming in carbon sequestration.
Any other questions from the floor? While there is none, there's one question from Zaldi Mabolo. I am not sure if this is part of your research areas, but I want to know if there are studies in the Philippines on the effects of ocean warming and coastal eutrophication on the carrageenan yield and quality. How will these conditions impact production in the Philippines?
Sorry.
Are there
Farming.
studies on the effects of ocean warming and coastal eutrophication on the carrageenan yield?
Of farm seaweed. Quality. So far, there's no as far as I know, there's no research being done on that regard. I think except siguro yung sa ocean acidification. Pero ano siya, lab scale. I think the algal ecophysiology lab works on that regard yung sa physiological response, and then Karaginan, and then yield and quality. So far, what we're seeing is that the research being done on Karaginan yield and quality of farm species is primarily targeting on those that are subjected to enrichment. No, so yung mga enriched hindi, yung mga fertilized na mga seaweeds para mas mabilis siyang lumago. So ginagamitan ng mga inorganic na fertilizer for them to and then so yun yung mga types of research being done in ShareDeck. But as to the effects of ocean warming, so far I am not so far sa Pilipinas, I am not aware of any work being done on that regard.
There's another question from Zoom. Thank you for the inspiring talk, Dr. Fred. Congratulations. From an anonymous attendee. I am working on the Japanese Susabinori Porphyra yazuensis. In our lab, we culture the seaweed with ease and can complete its life cycle under laboratory conditions. Regarding with gamet, at what extent is the research on its reproductive biology, or what could have been the biological limitations for its mass production?
Okay, so one is that the challenge with the cultivation of gamet in the Philippines, primarily in the northern Philippines, is primarily because one, we lack the facilities for the conduct of reproductive biological studies. So I was actually talking with one of the faculty of the Mariano Marcos State University in Ilocos Norte. It's a university that was actually funded by the UST Picard to work on the cultivation of gamet. I think one of the challenges is that they're able to produce. So for those that are not familiar, your gamet has two life history stage. So you have your folio stage, the one that you can actually see in the wild. So yung parang leaf-like or blade-like na thallus. And then it will have a microscopic na filamentous stage, which we call conchocelli stage. So this conchocelli stage, once they mature, they need in order for them to mature, they need to reach a certain degree of temperature na nagtitrigger na maturity and release ng kanilang conchospores. And then these conchospores are actually the ones that develop into the folios na nakikita nyo sa wild. So if I remember correctly, the work done at MMSU, they were able to produce the conchocelli stage, but they weren't able to mature the conchocelli stage in order for it to produce the folios stage that you can actually see in the wild. So the challenge, we don't have the facility to actually complete the life cycle because it will need a lot of control on the temperature, day length of the seaweed or that we expose the seaweeds into in order for you to actually complete that life cycle. So first siguro, I mean, I'm thinking we're actually working on it now, on a proposal about it now na sabi ko, they really need to set up an algal room facility where they can actually control the light and then the temperature of the different of their culture conditions so that they can actually facilitate the maturity and then the release of the conchocelli stage. So it's more on the facilities, actually the infrastructure. We are lacking the infrastructure to complete them and to actually cultivate them.
If just raise your hand na lang po here in the room if you guys have questions. There's a question from Jeffrey Usigan from Zoom. He was wondering what particular species of ulva is on culture already. Their undergrad research is on ulva species in Cagayan.
So, if you are asking about the uva species in the Philippines that are being cultured, it's usually the reports are always SP. So, we don't know what specific species of seaweeds of ulva are actually being targeted now for a culture. But at least in our lab, I think we're trying our so in the lab, actually in Bulana Marine Laboratory, we do have hatchery set up for the culture of ulva. And I think the ones that we're culturing are ulva onoy. Tama ba? CM. So what we're culturing in Bulana Marine Laboratory is ulva onoy. So the ones that we're doing that we're culturing in aquaria.
Thank you, sir. One more question from anonymous attendee on Zoom. Indonesian President Joko Widodo on Thursday said the government will push for the development of domestic seaweed processing industry, including for the production of fuel. If the Philippines pursues bioethanol production from seaweeds, in addition to increasing production for food, natural products, and industrial applications, could this lead to a resurgence of the seaweed industry, which is currently trailing Indonesia? Should seaweed farming be encouraged in the West Philippine Sea?
Okay. Yeah, medyo complicated yung sagot kasi the advantages of Indonesia with respect to the Philippines is primarily because of the tawag nito, of the farmable areas in Indonesia, no? So Indonesia, when you compare it to the Philippines, they can actually maximize the reef flat that they have kasi aside from the really nice water movement, they don't, unlike the Philippines that is visited by 20 plus typhoons, Indonesia is relatively safe for those kinds of natural disasters. So they are actually able to produce more. And aside from that, they can, as I mentioned earlier, na-maximize nila yung kanilang reef flat, unlike sa Philippines na yung the entire yung entire Pacific seaboard, ano yun, sobrang hindi mo mapapakinabangan year-round. Mostly. Kasi nga, the Pacific Ocean tends to have a very, very high water movement. So, high wave action, malakas, tapos lagi pang dinadaanan ng bagyo. So, hindi mo talaga magagamit yung masyado, yung Pacific seaboard. So, yun yung isa sa mga major advantage talaga noong nung sa Indonesia. And with respect to biofuel, the utilization of, kasi yung farm, when we're talking about farm seaweed, you're mostly talking about Capaphycus eucuma, no? So your guso. And farming of Capaphycus and eucuma is primarily for the high-value natural products na karaginan. And as of now, kasi karaginan commands a higher price as compared to its utilization for the biofuel. So when you're talking about biofuel kasi, it shouldn't compete with an existing market, diba? It should be an add-on. So pwede naman na gamitin yung mga byproduct ng karaginan production. Pero in a paper that we wrote actually in 2015, we're actually advocating for the use of other seaweed resources, hindi Capaphycus and eucuma, but your sargassum, your hydrocrathus can be seasonal, your uva, your turbinaria. But that is still subject for our capacity to actually mass propagate them. So we really need to harness them through developing culture technologies. So lahat ng yung utilization, mass utilization, commercialization of our seaweed resources should really be anchored on our efforts then to conserve them and sustainably produce them So that's why it's very important for us to develop culture technologies for these different seaweed resources.
In that line of thinking po, there's a question from Dr. Malu Maglon. Hi Fred, thank you for your very good and inspiring work and very promising too. My question is, are Philippine laws in place for the protection and conservation of seaweeds? Baka yun na lang muna. Tapos later
Okay.
yung next.
So there's a very, very nice paper by Jo, forgot her last name, Jo of UP Visayas. So she's part of the seaweed research group. She surveyed the policies associated with seaweeds in the Philippines, and there are quite a lot. Okay, but the problem is that the Philippines is really, sorry, off the record, the Philippines is really, really good in creating really nice law, but it's very, very bad in implementing. So there are a lot of policies and laws associated in the protection and conservation of seaweed resources, but the implementation of these different laws are very, very weak.
There's a question from Francis. Do you have update on before initiatives of setting up farmed seaweed nurseries in areas where seaweed farms can be put up, I guess? I understand some of the seedlings are produced from carpospores in collaboration with SIFDEC.
Hmm.
SIFDEC for some time has also been engaged in seaweed research.
They still are. So SIFDEC are still. I actually forgot to include them, but they are actually They're actively working on producing seaweeds, especially yung mga seed stocks for distribution for farmers, especially those areas na deplete yung kanilang mga seaweeds kaya dahil sa natural disasters or even because of ice disease or even epiphytism. As to the update on the BFAR efforts, I honestly don't have an idea as to, but that's actually one of the things that we're actually pushing for. No, na the strengthening of the BFAR's seaweeds research and extension work on seaweed. Kasi nga the different seaweed farming areas often requires nurseries. And sometimes kasi yung mga nurseries na yun often mahirap siya i-maintain. So if actually the national agencies and the regional government agencies can contribute to that effort, it will be very, very great. Although I understand na together with NSTDC, one of our labs here, Algal Ecophysiology Lab, works with the National Seaweed Training Development Center of the Philippines in, I think it's Sorsogon, towards creating new breeds or new strains of seaweeds that can actually be distributed to the different seaweed farming areas across the Philippine archipelago. There are efforts like that, but as to the institutionalization of these efforts, I'm not really sure if they've already done that, but I hope so.
Okay. That was actually a very good parang end to this talk since you shared nga how we can really push for a more institutional, like national effort in terms of farming seaweeds and really utilizing our seaweed resources. So with that, again, thank you so much, Dr. Fred, for the very inspiring and talk about the work that's been done around the Philippines. Thank you, everyone. Feel free po to have some drinks outside.
We have snacks sa labas.